Hey folks, hope that you're well. I'm shooting it off the cuff today. I have something going through my mind about baseball, kind of related to youth baseball school, and I thought, you know what, I'll press record, say a few words, hopefully get some feedback, and we'll just see what happens. And so this is mostly, I think, towards parents, and I'm kind of labeling it, or kind of titling this little, I don't know what you're going to call it, just this little mind dump, learn to think like a coach. And even more than that, learn to think like a good coach. And a lot of us who are here are parent coaches, little league teams and whatnot, but realize that all of us are also just coaches of our kids at home, and we have the responsibility to support our coaches that they're under. And to do that, we really got to learn to think like a good coach would. And so that's the whole idea of this. So here's what brought it to mind. A week ago, first game ever for school ball for Traeger, and it was so much fun. So I got to go and be an actual parent and a fan at this, and it was a blast, and really proud of all these kids. They're doing really well. But there's a point, and I have a little diagram here on my iPad. Runners, as you can see on second and third, there was less than 2 outs. And so the first thing you think as a coach, me as like a little league coach and, growing up playing a lot of ball, is are we going to even hold the guy on second? Less than 2 outs. We were a little bit ahead. We had a guy throwing gas. And so that's the first thing I'm thinking. Well, so the first thing that happened was that our second baseman was charged with holding him on. And so I first started thinking like, this guy's throwing gas. Hope there's not like a, grounder through, this position back here. And so then the next thing that happened is as this guy just wasn't honoring it at all. He would get way off here, like almost halfway. And then we had our second baseman literally standing on the base. And we didn't throw back. And so I started thinking just in my mind, and I wasn't like, no big judgments or anything. I just started thinking like, well, if we're not going to throw back there, then why would we hold on? Now, I do understand why we wouldn't throw back there. There's a guy on third, and at a young age, and at a certain time of the game and the season, you're just like, not even going to worry about the guy on second because there's a guy on third. And sometimes to get in a rundown, it's like he was so far off that he was baiting the rundown to just send the guy third home. And, at a certain age, you might have a 50-50 chance of scoring at home. So we weren't taking the bait. And so I started asking like, well, why would we even hold him on then? Let's just like get this guy back in his position so he's ready to field. And sure enough, a ball did go through there. But later on, I started thinking, I'm like, well, duh, you got to think like a good coach. And a great coach, a lot of times, will choose developing a player and helping him learn a skill and a task on the ball field over giving up a run, or doing whatever. And so that's what was happening here. The coaches saw that this guy needed some reps and some help learning how to hold on the runner. And it's like, who cares? We're not going to throw back. We just need this guy to start getting used to how to hold on a runner at second. So by the way, I'd love to ask you a question. How do you guys teach holding a runner on second? Personally, I've taught like the middle infield, like shortstop and second, kind of dancing back and forth. The idea is that, the big idea is that when you get the runner to come back to second, you've done your job and you can start recovering to your position as a middle infielder. So I've actually always said, that, for example, if the second base was going to hold on here, you need to kind of come back and forth, back between here, but I've always taught never get closer than 2 or 3 steps away, because if the pitcher does throw back to second, you have time to take a couple shuffles over and meet the ball. The pitcher's job is to throw over the bag, and then you'll meet the ball, and we got it. And I've always taught that the only time then to stand on the bag is if this guy has such a big lead that me as a shortstop or second baseman is saying to the pitcher, this is ridiculous, you throw it to me. Like, so if you're on the bag, you're calling for the ball, and the pitcher better throw the ball back. But that's just what I've taught, and I realize that I honestly think I got my kid in trouble for that. And I do realize the bigger picture, he was standing on the bag and weren't throwing, and I do think that part of what our coaches were trying to teach was this guy to anticipate the leg kick and the delivery home to get back in his position. At the end of the day, you still do have time. You got to learn how to anticipate. And I think that is what was missing there, was this art of anticipation. I even heard the coach say once, anticipate. And so all to say, as I thought about it more, I'm like, it makes sense. It didn't make sense at first, but as I thought about it from the coach's perspective, trying to work with this second baseman, developing second baseman, this is why it's happening. And I started wondering how many other times during a game, the course of a season, does that happen where parents will second guess a coach or wonder or doubt a coach, and yet it's just something like that. There's just a different objective going on in the coach's mind and a better objective. A better objective is to develop that player when you're up a certain game, you're up by a handful of runs or whatever, or the game doesn't even matter. You know what I mean? I mean, guys, 9, 8, 9, 10 years old, summer leagues, let's be coaches that develop players, and we're not just trying to worry about every single little win. We need to develop players. So here's a couple implications for developing players and as parents to learn how to think like a great coach, a developer coach. One is where your kid plays. So the position that your kid plays. A coach doesn't always get the luxury of placing a kid at his best position, because a coach has to place 9 players out there that work the best together. I'm not just talking about chemistry. I'm just talking about they only have so many tools, and they have to put the kids out there to work the best as a collective group. And so one example here is, we'll just use one from Traeger. He played a lot of first for me and has worked hard at it. But that was good for our summer team. This fall team, school ball team, is totally different. And I told Traeger right away, and he understood it right away, that you're just going to play where you can help the team the most. That's just the bottom line. And sometimes you going to a different position is so another kid can slide into another position that they're better at and not be out of position themselves. And that's what a coach is trying to do, is arrange the whole thing on there to where it plays in harmony and everyone has a chance to thrive and to prosper and all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing. On the flip side, though, as you're developing, I'll just come out and say it. I know of teams and of coaches who are coaching 8-year-old teams, and sure, they're kind of competitive teams, but those kids already have set positions, infield or outfield, and they don't switch except for like literally one time a year. And to me, it's just short-sighted because so much can happen over the coming years with a player, especially when they get to their school teams. I mean, you're on a competitive team, but then those kids that are really great infielders that just don't even get a chance, or that could be great infielders, are going to end up playing infield for their school, but they haven't played infield at all growing up on their summer travel team and whatnot. And besides that, so much can change when a kid is young. I mean, 8 years old is so young. So I say this because I've had parents approach me and say, what should I do if my 8-year-old played outfield the entire year and has literally only played infield for a half game? And I just got to say, well, honestly, I think that you should at least consider looking for another team. And then to the coaches, I would just say, like, we all know that so much can change with kids, and especially as they hit puberty and whatnot. So I'm always looking at just trying to develop players. And it's listen, I've been around a lot of baseball, and I know that so many of us can see talent and assess player probabilities right away. We see how they move, we see their instincts, we see their arm strength, we see their speed and all that kind of stuff. But you still got to think long-term for that player, and that on their future team, that it's going to be a whole different team than they're on now. So I'm still, as a coach, as a Little League coach, I'm in the business of developing those players, not creating wins for my summer team. But that's just personal. I would love to hear other thoughts on this, the opposing side. You know what I mean? Like, no, stick them at shortstop from 6 on if they're the shortstop, and don't let them play anywhere. Stick them in left field or right field from the beginning. And I would love to hear the reasons for that. And I'm not just like being facetious or anything. I'd love to hear that. But that's one thing that I personally have tried to err towards developing the player. There is a time when you do start drawing the line and putting then players in positions where they can succeed. And for me, that's like kind of as they enter junior high baseball. So last year was the first season where I just flat out said to parents, like, listen, if your kid can't throw it from, third or short to first consistently, then he won't be able to play infield until he can prove that in practice. And then, yeah, we want to get them some reps there for sure. So that's that. Long-term skill development over immediate wins. You know what I mean? So the last thing of this, kind of going back to the beginning, is that situational choices that coaches make, you got to realize that sometimes they have a different and better objective in mind than you do. Like this example that I shared first with the second baseman holding the runner on. Realize that a lot of times a coach will leave in a pitcher a little bit longer than maybe in the stands you want them to because they're trying to give that kid a chance to pitch through and pitch out of trouble, and just to try and get him enough pitches to where he can actually improve. You know what I mean? And so I've been there many times where a kid is struggling and they're walking one after another, but I want to give them a good 30, 40 pitches, so that they actually have a chance to improve. Because it's like, well, he throws so good in practice and then he gets in the game and he's like terrible. It's like, well, he just needs more reps in the game. So as a coach developing a player, that's what I got to give him, even if it's ugly. So those kind of situational choices, that's another reason, just kind of thinking off why I love just playing a regular season or a rec league, because those games just don't have as much weight as tournaments. And I know that at one point I kind of love this idea of like, oh, let's just play like a handful of tournaments on the weekend and then practice during the week, because I love practice. I think practices are so productive. But the only problem there is that then you get on these teams where every game matters so much that coaches have a hard time being biased towards player development, because they're kind of biased towards the win and towards the tournament result and getting into the right bracket. And there's all kinds of strategery in that. I realize that some coaches like throw certain games to... It's crazy to me. It's just crazy, crazy, crazy. But that's it. I'll stop talking. Let me know what you think. Anything from like the X's and O's of holding a runner on a second to ways that you have learned to think like a coach, to other examples, to anything. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but that's all I got for now. I'll end with this. Learn to think like a great coach. All right, folks, thanks.